All right. Seems like I'm live. So, hello to everyone who's watching me right now. Um, my okay, let me just. So, my Neovim talk is about Neovim options. As you can see, I've titled this "No Other Option." I'll talk about that later. So, it's about Neovim option internals. Um, so, let me just introduce myself for a minute. In a minute, you might be wondering who is this guy? Why is he here? So a little bit about me. I've been I'm Famiu. Uh, you can see my name right here. I've been a Neovim contributor since 2021. I authored several features. You might know some of them like global status line, WinBar, user in command, and Vim CMD, among other things. I'm also currently working full time to refactor Neovim options. So all the money that people donate to Neovim, that's where it goes. It goes to people who work full time, like me, for example. So thanks to the sponsors for making this possible for me. Uh, oh, and lastly, I'm still a high school student. Yep. By the way, here's my social media. This is my GitHub, github.com/Famiu. I stream on Twitch sometimes, twitch.tv/ this. Famiu was taken, so I had to replace the I with a 1. Uh, I also have a YouTube. I haven't uploaded anything to it yet, but I plan to. And I'm on Twitter, twitter.com/FamiuHawk. All right, without further ado, let's get into the actual talk. Here's the things I plan to discuss in this talk. First of all, I want to talk about what Neovim options even are. Like, I think most of you already know what Neovim options are and have a basic idea of them, but I'll still gloss over it in a bit. Then, here's where the meat of the talk starts. I'll talk about the limitations of Neovim options, like what problems they have, what issues we're currently dealing with, what people complain about, that sort of stuff. And then we'll talk about a little bit about how Neovim options work internally. So I'll explain a bit of the internal details. I won't go too in depth because that will be really hard for you, some of you guys, to understand. But I'll give a high level overview of how options work, and hopefully that can help you guys understand why exactly it's so hard to work on Neovim options and why I'm working on this for so long. Then I'm gonna talk about what stands in the way of fixing these limitations. Like, if there are so many problems, why hasn't anyone fixed them yet? Like, why is it so hard? So that's what I'm gonna talk about next after that. And once I'm done with that, I want to talk about how we plan to overcome these limitations. Like, what are we doing right now? We don't just want to stand there and do nothing about these problems. Of course, we're going to fix them, but the question is how? What are we planning? What are we doing right now? What do we do in the future? That sort of stuff. And lastly, I want to talk about what you can expect going forward. All right. So let's first talk about what Neovim options even are. So I think most of you already know about Neovim options, but I'll gloss over it in a bit. Neovim options are basically values that allow interfacing with internal Neovim variables. So like, let's say you want to like turn on line numbers. So you do set number, and that enables line numbers on the left side of your Neovim window. What this does basically is that it modifies an internal variable which tells Neovim, hey, the user wants line numbers, so show them. And that's basically what options are. They're used to customize the behavior of Neovim or achieve desired special effects. For example, like we have this example here, set number, relative number. This turns on hybrid line numbers. And then we have set no HL search to disable search highlighting. So it basically allows you to modify how Neovim behaves. As of right now, options can be either numbers, booleans, or strings. This is foreshadowing, by the way, for the future of the talk. So remember this. We have three examples right here. It's like set wrap, this is a boolean option. This is set scroll off, this is a number option. And this is set winbar, this is a string option. So we have like the three option types displayed here. And lastly, options are a nightmare to deal with. Like I cannot explain to you how difficult it is to work with options. Like if you looked at the options code prior to when I started refactoring it would give you nightmares. I actually had dreams about Neovim option code. Like I'm not kidding, I actually did. Anyway, so let's move on to limitations of Neovim options. What makes options so bad to deal with? Well, actually, this is only the user facing problems. I'm not talking about the internal code stuff yet, but this is like the user facing problem, the problems the users would notice, that sort of stuff. So, first limitation, and this is probably the biggest limitation of options, is that they only support three types: numbers, booleans, strings, that all only those three. So when we need more complicated data structures, what do? We only have three types. And surely we can't represent them using numbers or Boolean values. So what we do instead is we represent them using strings. But of course, you can already see how that can be problematic. Like when you have really complicated data structures, representing them as strings is annoying, to say the least. Third, callback options can be set to Lua functions. I think those of you who have a Lua config already understand what this means. So you can't, let's say you want to set uh, format expr. Let's say you want to set format expr. That's a callback option. So you can set it to a function, but you can't set it to a Lua function. Uh, Actually, you can, but I'll more on that later. Next, there's no clear way to indicate an unset local value for a global local option. So some of you may know what a global local option is, some of you may not. Uh, for those who don't, I'll explain this later. Just know that it's an option that can have both global and local values, and there's no clear way to indicate when a local value is unset and when to use the global value for an option. So that leads to a bunch of problems. More on that later. Next, we have multiple interfaces for setting options. This one is very annoying for when working on the code. Like there are like 4 or 5 different code paths that do essentially the same thing, which is setting an option, and it's so annoying to deal with. Uh, you'll see why in a bit. And lastly, the behavior is unintuitive and confusing, especially for window local and global local options. Again, more on that later. All right, let's move on. Firstly, let's talk about simulating non-trivial option types like dictionaries, lists, functions as strings. So you can see like 3 examples. This is a dict-like string option, fill chars, fold, diff. As you can see, there's a key here, and this is the value. Once again, key value. This is a dict-like option, so this is basically a dictionary option, but represented as a string. Secondly, we have list-like string options. These are basically string options, but they represent a list separated by a comma. As you can see, it's that while mode equals longest, comma, list, comma, full. So these are 3 values. Lastly, we have function-like string options. So these ones behave like functions. As you can see, this one is set to a Lua function. I just said that you can set uh, function you can set callback options to Lua functions, but clearly here here you're setting it to a Lua function. What's the deal? I'll talk about that in a bit. All right. Now let's talk more about list-like and dict-like options. I'll talk about functions up in the next slide, I think, or the slide after that. Anyway, so in Vim script, when you wanna let's say append, prepend, or remove from a list-like dict-like option, you do it like this. Let's say you have a value of fill char set here, and then you wanna add a value like this. So the first line works as you would expect. It sets the value for fill chars. The second line does not. So it now sets fill chars to fold space, diff space, fold x. You can notice that fold is here twice. So instead of replacing the value, it added on top of it. And then when removing it, you can't even just remove it using the key. You need the value as well. You guys can already see why this is annoying. In Lua, you can't you can't even append, prepend, or remove using vim.o. You just can't. You just have to always set the value directly. That used to be the case until TJ. Shout out to him, by the way, he did great. He introduced vim.opt, which allows appending, prepending, and removing from list like or declined options. But this has the same limitations as Vim script. The one limitation it doesn't have is that this problem, the second line problem, that's fixed. So if you like do, if you if you append to fold, for example, like this, it actually replaces the value instead of adding on top of it. So that one's fixed, but otherwise every other problem remains. Now, I said I was going to talk about function like options, so here it is. Function like options can be set to Lua options, or that's what I said, but they actually can, but only through vlua. Now, if you have used vlua before, you know it only allows global functions or functions that are returned by some module. So you can't just use a local function with it. So here's an example. Let's say we have myfunc. This has some argument and does something, and another function that also does something. And if you want to set vim.out.completefunc equals myfunc, this isn't possible. So you can't use a local value here. But if you want to set it to vim.opt.completefunc equals vlua.myotherfunc. This is a global value, so you can access it using vlua. Notice the underscore g here. That indicates that it's a global value for those who haven't used Lua. So this line works, but the first one doesn't. So because using Lua functions for options isn't possible yet. That's another limitation. Next, I want to talk about no way to indicate an unset local value for global local options. Firstly, the first problem this causes is that many global local options have like arbitrary values that represent an unset local value, because otherwise how are you supposed to indicate an unset local value if you don't have a specific type or value for it? So this is my favorite one, by the way. Undo levels. It uses negative 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Why? Nobody knows. But that's what it uses because that's what Bram decided. Actually, I don't know what if Bram decided this one. But anyway, this is what someone decided, I guess. But this is my favorite one. And then we have auto read, which uses negative 1. But hold on. You might be wondering, isn't auto read a Boolean function? Is it? Turns out it's not. Boolean options are a lie. Vim Boolean options are actually tri-states. So they have 3 states: true, false, and none. And only global local options need the third state, which is again negative 1 or none. And it turns out auto read is the only global local option. So that's the only one that actually ends up using that state. Anyway, that was some Vim option trivia for you guys. And lastly, there is no way to unset WinBar for a single window. Again, I worked on WinBar myself. I implemented it myself. This is a problem I came across when uh, implementing it. There was no way to indicate that WinBar was unset. So string options, all global local string options use an empty string to indicate that a value is unset. But with WinBar, there's a problem. So if you know WinBar, if you've used it, it only you you basically enable WinBar by setting it to something. So let's say you do set WinBar equals foo, then that does two things. It enables the WinBar, and then it sets the text in the WinBar to foo. Problem is, if you set the WinBar to an empty string, what's that supposed to mean? Does that mean there is no win bar? Or does that mean there's an empty win bar? Because if you do the same with status line, let's say you do set status line equals empty string, then you'll still have a status line. It'll just be empty. But if you do that with win bar, what do you want to do? So what the behavior we decided is that when the global value is empty, it disables win bar for all windows. But when the local value is empty and there's still a global value, we just use the global value instead. So we can't disable WinBar for a single window, which I know is annoying. I find it annoying myself. And I've wanted to fix it for a while, but unfortunately, with how options are structured, there's no way to fix it yet. Moving on. Another limitation of Neovim options. There's multiple interfaces for setting an option. With Vim script, you have set local, set global. These are like the most basic ones. This one sets both global and local scope set, and then set local sets local value, and set global sets the global value. You can also do it using let. So let and opt equals val. This sets once again like set the global and local value. Set and b opt. This sets both, and then set and b of this sets the local value, and then set and g of this sets the global value. Next we have vim script functions, several of them. Get buff bar, get win bar. This is for getting a buffer local or window local option value. And then we have set buff bar, set win bar. That's for getting that's for setting buffer and window local option values. We also have API functions like nvim get option value, nvim set option value, and we have some deprecated API functions. Thankfully, they got removed because they had even more limitations of their own. So the deprecated ones are nvim get options and nvim set option, as you can see here. Now, if all of this sounds confusing, I agree with you. It is. But what can you do? Anyway, Lua. So there are several ways of setting an option through Lua as well, as I've discussed before. There's vim.o, vim.bo, vim.wo, vim.go. So what this does is vim.o works basically like set. Vim.bo and vim.wo, these two work like set local. I always found it annoying how there was a separation between these two, and they couldn't just have made vim.lo for local option. That's very annoying to me. Anyway, and then we have vim.go, which sets a global option like set global. And then we have TJ's contribution, vim.opt, vim.opt local, and vim.opt global. Again, these are fantastic ways of setting options. These actually allow you to append, prepend, and modify values and work with like more complicated options easier. But this has some overhead. So if you want to say get like a number option or a boolean option, this makes it more complicated, unfortunately, because we have no way of dealing with it right now. And then third, we have API functions. This is the same as Vim scripts. You can use a Lua. You can use API functions to Lua and Vim script all the same. So the same things apply here as well. Next, how did all of this happen? I don't know, but it probably went something like this. I suppose you guys are familiar with XKCD. You guys know what this is, but I'll just leave it here so you guys can have some time to process this. Anyway, option scopes. Oh my, this is something. Option types can be options can be divided into four types depending on the scope. So there are global options. This one is straightforward. Value is global, there is no catch. This is the only one that makes sense though. The rest of them make no sense. We have window local options. These options have a value that is local to the window, except when it isn't. Except when it isn't. What does that mean? I don't know. Nobody knows. Actually, we do know a little, but not really. And then we have buffer local values, buffer local options. These have a value that is local to the buffer, or is it? Who knows? I'll talk about that in a bit. And then we have global local options. These are the bane of my existence. These haunt me in my nightmares. Literally, these haunt me in my nightmares. These options have both global and local values. There's no way that can go wrong, right? Like, we already have window local and buffer local options, and they have no catch at all, right? Now, when you combine them with global options, there's absolutely no way that can go wrong, right? Anyway, moving on. This would all be fine, this would all be fine. Except three out of these four scopes have a catch. Window local options actually have two values, one for all buffers and one for the current buffer. That makes sense, except it doesn't really work in a sensible way. And the core implementation for this is just hideous. Buffer local options can have global values too. So you know the part that says it's buffer local? That's a lie. It's not local at all. It actually also has a global value. What's the difference between a buffer local value and a global local buffer option? Who knows? Not me. I don't know. Who knows? When you set the option value for a global local option, it also sets the local value. Now, is there a world where this makes sense? Sure, I can see the argument for it. But also, why? If you set the global value for an option, you want to set the global value. Why would you want to set the local value? I'm talking about API, by the way. I mean, I know always sets the local and global value, but I'm talking about through the API. It also, when you set the global value, it also sets the local value. I have no idea. Actually, I do have an idea, but you know, moving on. Why is all of this important? Like, who cares? Why should I care? Why should you care? Who gives a damn about this? Why should you give a damn about this? Well, let's see. Options are the core component for configuring Neovim. So, if you want to do basically anything, modify your status line, set line numbers, uh, configure line wrapping, set a win bar. You wanna, let's say, you wanna set your complete func. You wanna basically anything. You have to do it through options. Anything. Basically, all Neovim configs have to deal with Neovim options. Like, I don't think you can show me a single usable config that doesn't set any options. Now I know some bastard is gonna try to make a config that doesn't set any options. But if you do that, I hate you. I just hate you. Shame on you. Spend your time on something else, please. Every Neovim feature is connected to options in some way. So let's say global status line, that's something I worked on. That's basically my first big PR. That's connected to options. Like you have to enable it by setting last status to 3. And then let's say WinBar, that's also something I worked on. You have to also set it to set using set WinBar. And then lastly, improving the behavior of options will also make it easier to add features that require more sophisticated configuration. Let's say you have an option that like has a lot of configurability. Let's say you have a feature. So when adding a feature like that, you have to consider how it's going to be configured. Right now, we have a bunch of functions and stuff. Like for diagnostics, we have vim.diagnostics.config, which allows you to configure diagnostics. But if we had dict options, we could have just made that an option, right? So that's why improving Neovim options will also improve everything else. Every other feature that has been added, that will be added, that'll be improved. Let's talk about how Neovim options work internally, or more specifically, how they used to work before the refactor. Because everything I'm gonna be talking about after this is basically before I started refactoring it. I definitely improved a lot of things, at least I hope, after I started refactoring it. But this is all before. So how do new Vim options work internally? Let's see. They don't. They really don't. Like, how the hell do you expect them to work? They're a mess. They don't work. But anyway, seriously. Each option type is stored internally using a C variable type. Boolean options, they use int. Why don't they use bool? I don't know, some legacy C reason, I guess. Who knows? Once again, who knows? They use int instead of bool. Why? Why would you do this? Anyway, moving on. Number options use long. Why long specifically? I don't know. Who knows? String options use C strings. Const char, this is a C string. Null terminated. If you know C, you basically know what this is. Could we have used something better like a custom string struct or something? Sure, I guess. We didn't though. And lastly, we have a separate function for setting option types. Set bool option, set num option, set string option. These three, one for each type. You should understand what this does because, you know, we have three types. We should have three functions. Everyone loves code duplication, right? Everyone loves it. Everyone wants more of it, right? Right? Yes, you do. Yes, you do. Anyway, more stuff on options. We have separate code paths for each option interface because why shouldn't we? We need more code, right? More code is better code, right? Anyway, so set uses do set option value. This is what set uses. So this is a function that sets an option value. Let uses xlet option that also sets an option value. API functions use set option value. Now you will notice these two are almost the same names. Almost. So we have two functions that set an option value. One is called set option value, one is called do set option value. Why? Well, if you have seen this presentation, you already know the theme of this presentation. I don't know why. Who knows? I don't. I've just started refactoring it. That's all I do. I don't know why things exist and why this abomination exists. It just does. Anyway, list like, string like, and dict like options. I've talked about this in a previous slide, but these three are sorry. List like, function like. Sorry, I said string like here for some reason. List like, function like, and dict like options are taken as strings and then manually processed and stored in a struct corresponding to the option. So, you know how I talked about how lists and dicts are represented using strings, but they aren't like internally stored as strings. They're still processed and then stored in a struct that represents the string. Sorry, that represents the option, so that it's easier to deal with. For example, fill chars has a struct for you know accessing each fill chart so that it doesn't have to manually process the string every time. Moving on. Why is this so hard to fix? Like, there's a problem, just fix it, bro. Stop complaining. Why are you complaining? Why am I complaining, huh? You'll see. So the Vim options code, Neovim option code, is a mess, and that's putting it lightly. There is lots of code duplication. Again, we love code duplication here, right? Lots of code duplication around many places. Remember the separate option interface thing I mentioned earlier? Yep, that'll be useful. There is no unified way of representing an option value. So num values, bool values, string values, those three are represented separately. There is no single interface for representing an option value of all types. There is no union type for options. And thirdly, messy, borderline, unreadable code. Take a guess what this line does. I'll give you some time. I'll give you a minute. Read it and guess what this does. All right, I said I was gonna give you a minute, but I don't have the patience to wait a minute. If you wanted a minute, I don't care. Who cares? Anyway, am I going to explain what this does to you? No, actually, I will. I will. I want to be kind to you guys today, even though I haven't been kind at all. So, what this basically does, so we have an option alias, or we had an option alias, which is viminfo, which basically was an alias to shada, the option shada. So what that basically does is it takes the first character of the name viminfo, and if that matches, then it sets the index of shada to set this finds the shada index. So it has a static variable shada index set to -1, and if it's set to -1, it finds the option index. Otherwise, it reuses the index. If you know how static variables work, that should make sense. Anyway, and then and then it's and then it uses that as the option index if for Vim info. So what it basically does is it sets the Vim info index to the shade index. That's basically all it does. Now, could we just have a function to resolve aliases so we didn't have even have to get to this point? We could have. In fact, we did, but we still chose to do this for some reason. Whoever wrote this, shame on you. You disgust me. So, what are we going to do about it? Right now, the plan is to aggressively refactor into the Neovim code base. And I want to say I want to aggressively refactor it. I don't want to calmly refactor it. I want to do it aggressively as I possibly can. There's going to be a lot of aggression. Anyway, the goal is to make the code more readable because it isn't right now. It just isn't. I want to make the code more maintainable, extensible, so that it's easier to add more option types, that it's more maintainable, so that any existing option types, if there's a problem with them, we can easily fix it, and anyone can understand the code by just looking at it instead of having to smack their head on a wall 30 times just to understand a single line of code. We want to reduce code duplication. Sorry, I know you guys love code duplication, but I don't. So I'm going to reduce it as much as I can. We want to get rid of multiple interfaces for doing similar things. Again, I know you guys love it. I don't. So we're going to get rid of it. And lastly, we want to remove arbitrary behavior of options while keeping breaking changes minimal. Actually, I don't promise that I will keep breaking changes minimal. I will break a lot of things probably. In fact, I'm probably gonna break my own skull after this talk. What have we done so far? So, you might be wondering, this guy's been yapping for like, what, 20, 30 minutes right now. What has this guy even done? What's his deal? Why is he so moody today? I'll tell you what I've done. I introduced an obval type into the code base to represent the option value, to represent an option value of any type. Hold on, I'll show you the PR in a bit. This, this is the PR. Hold on. This removed the get option T struct that was basically something useless that I removed. That doesn't matter. What really matters is what I added. Hold on a sec. So I added an obval stub, which is basically a tagged union. So let's say you have obval free. This is nothing for nil, boolean, and number values, but for string values, it frees the string and all that good stuff. So what this basically does is it allows us to treat any option as a single value and pass it to some general boilerplate functions like obval free to free the option, obval copy to copy the option, and then all this stuff, obval to string to convert any option into a representation. Yeah? Oh, okay. Sorry, I keep forgetting to zoom. Anyway, sorry. So as I was saying, we have three. So opt-val free, this basically you have a nil boolean number case. These three types don't need to be freed, so we do nothing here. And then we have string values, in which case we free the string. And then we have opt-val copy. It works similarly. This one opt-val match type, it matches the type with the option to see if the option supports that type. Opt-val to string, this is used for printing an option value. And that's a bunch of this stuff basically. Then I unified the option set function for all option types. So set num option, set bool option, set string option. I unified those three. This is the PR for it. So give me a sec. Hold on, GitHub is being weird. Classic GitHub. Anyway, so you notice this do set stuff I mentioned earlier? That this is what set uses? I removed all of that. All of that is gone now. Gone. Yes, I'm happy about it. Do set option string also gone. Completely gone. Do set option value gone. Instead, we have, uh, see, give me a sec. Set bool option gone. Set num option also gone. Now we just have, hold on. Now we just have a single set option. Actually, the string options weren't unified yet back then. I actually have a separate PR for it, but I unified the num options and bool options, and all the other code paths. I unified all of those. And this one, I unified set option and set string option. Let's take a look. Oh, by the way, if you notice, all of these have more removals than additions. I love when that happens. Removing code is always better than adding code. Oh, but hold on. Oh, by the way, this is I wasn't supposed to be talking about this, but I'll just point it out since I came across it. I actually made a function to check if an option's local value is unset, so nobody has to go through the trauma that I did. This is did set option. Um, Hold on, I'll search for it. Okay, yeah, set string option. This is gone, as you can see, and instead this got merged to num and bool options. Next, I unified almost all of the different code paths for getting and setting an option. I just showed you that the do set stuff and all that. I removed that. Almost all of them. There's still some string specific stuff like set string option direct that I still haven't removed. And I have many other miscellaneous improvements. For more info, you can see this. Hold on, I'll just open it. This this is a roadmap containing everything that I've done and I want to do regarding options. You can see the link in the slide. If you want more info, just go here. Anyway, I did some more miscellaneous stuff. I've done this before, so there are some options that you can't set. Some options that are basically mutable. So I so these were basically only limited to Boolean options before, but I replaced their flags so now they can so any option type can be mutable. I've done split get option value into smaller functions. So get option value that was a function that surprisingly got the option value. Who would have guessed, right? Anyway, it did three things. It got the option value, it checked if the option was hidden, and it returned the option flags. Why? Who knows? Anyway, since it had three purposes, I split it into three functions. And look, even though I literally split an option into three, somehow there are more removals than additions. Can you believe that? Ridiculous. And this hasn't been merged yet. I'm still working on it. Actually, I've done working on it. Someone needs to review it now. So what this basically does. So before, the internal code used the option name and used the function called find option, which uses the option name to do a linear search across all options to find the option index. So what I did was basically introduce a bunch of enum values to to basically hard code it to the option index, so we don't have to like linearly search through options like we used to. And this, and again, this somehow has more removals than additions. I don't know why, it just does. Hold on, this is a Lua generator, by the way. So we use Lua generators to generate like source files for certain stuff that we don't want to manually define. So what this does is it basically iterates to every option in options.lua. So we use a Lua file to basically store metadata of options. So it iterates through that and generates a header file containing option information. So what I did was I also made it generate an enum with the option name and option index. So we use that instead of like using find option with the option name string. That's probably gonna improve performance by a bit. And yeah, that's basically the stuff I wanted to show you guys for what I've done so far. And all of this was not done just by me. I know I seem like a superhuman now, but I'm not. Some of this stuff, a lot of this stuff was done by Lewis Russell. He's done a lot of great work on options. He's made my job a lot easier. He's also reviewed my PRs. Speaking of reviewing, thanks to B. Friddle, Bjorn, Desirts, and Justin for taking their time to review PRs. If they weren't so fast at reviewing stuff, I wouldn't be able to continue working so quickly. And I also annoy them a lot by pinging them all the time. So thanks for tolerating that. Moving on. What we're planning to do. I've showed you guys the roadmap. That's basically what we're planning to do, but I'll talk about it a bit here anyway. What you can expect in the future. So the goal right now is to unify the remaining duplicate interfaces for setting options. So the set string option direct, I want to remove that, and all the other string stuff. Remove code specific to string options. So there are like some string specific stuff like free string option, clear string option, and that sort of thing. I want to remove that. This is the most interesting one in my opinion. I want to allow options to have multiple types. So right now an option can only have a single type. The problem with that is that, remember when I talked about unset values for options? That can't be done if we only have a single type. So this ties right into the next point, which is add a unique option type that indicates an unset local value for global local options. Do you see where this is moving? I want to add dictionary list and function option types instead of emulating those types using strings. Yep, now you're seeing where this is heading. So the string values, they will still be modifiable as strings, but we'll also add dictionaries, lists, and function option types on top of that. So there'll be, so like dict options will be now strings and dicts, so you can set them using both. So there won't be any major breaking changes, but you'll also be able to customize it better. And lastly, I want to make Boolean options actually Boolean. If we have an unset value, we don't need that third none state that we use. So Boolean options will actually be Boolean. And there's some stuff specific to certain options. I want to allow unsetting winbar. I talked about that before. Isn't that amazing? I have to do all of this work so that we can set a single option. That's amazing, right? Oh gosh. Add a dict-based configuration option format for complicated options such as winbar, table, and status line. So status line, the syntax for status line is annoying to deal with, and it's basically an entire string. So what I want to plan to do, winbar, tab, line, status line, for these three options, I want to be able to uh, allow them to be modified as lists, so you can have like components and a list of components, and what it will do is merge all of those components together. That's what I'm planning to do eventually when we get to that point. So that's gonna be exciting, hopefully. Moving on. Now I want to summarize what I've talked about so far. Neovim options have a bunch of limitations that I've just discussed. Most of them are related to them being restricted to three option types, so no one set value, and no dict options, no string options, no function options, boolean values not actually being boolean, all of these stuff. You can basically tie it back into this, restricted to three types. Yep. Hold on, I gotta. Give me 5 minutes. Those limitations cannot yet be fixed because of any of them options. Code base is currently extremely difficult to maintain and extend. I've also talked about this. There's been ongoing progress to aggressively refactor Neovim options, which should allow us to eventually overcome these limitations if all goes right. In the future, we expect to have more option types, fewer interfaces, and more intuitive behavior in general. One last thing. Reading Neovim options code is traumatizing, if you hadn't guessed already. Please go to one of these links and donate if you can. If you want to sponsor my therapy session, github.com/sponsor/neovim, and we have opencollective.com/neovim. Either of those links is fine. Please sponsor Neovim if possible. It helps the project. It allows people like me to keep working on it. Lastly, thank you. Thanks for Thanks to the Neovim core team and other Neovim contributors for being so helpful and welcoming to me. I really appreciate it. Thanks to everyone who donated to Neovim and made it possible to work full time on a project that I love. I know I talked a lot of crap about Neovim options code today, but I do love the project itself. I love working on it. Well, it's like Stockholm syndrome, Like it traumatizes me and I end up loving it. Yep, that's basically it. And lastly, thank you for spending your time listening to my talk. It means a lot.